Sometimes the most extraordinary acts of kindness come from the most unexpected places. When Marcus Thompson, a single father working 3 jobs to keep his family afloat, rushed his 7-year-old son to the emergency room that cold November night, he never imagined his life was about to intersect with one of the city's most powerful businessmen. What started as a desperate father's plea for help would spiral into a story so unbelievable that it would shake the foundations of corporate America and challenge everything we think we know about human nature. The CEO who would change Marcus's life forever wasn't looking for publicity or praise. He was simply a man who made a split-second decision that would reveal the true measure of his character. But what happened after the cameras stopped rolling and the headlines faded would prove that sometimes the greatest gifts come wrapped in the most unexpected packages. This is the story of how one act of compassion set in motion a chain of events that nobody could have predicted. Least of all Marcus Thompson, who thought he was just fighting to save his son's life. What he discovered instead was that sometimes salvation comes from the most unlikely sources, and sometimes the people who save us are the ones who need saving most of all. Marcus Thompson's hands shook as he carried his 7-year-old son Jaden through the automatic doors of St. Mary's Children's Hospital. The boy's small body felt impossibly light in his arms, and his breathing came in short, labored gasps that sent panic shooting through Marcus's chest. Jaden's usually bright brown eyes were glazed with fever, and his dark skin had taken on a greyish pallor that made Marcus's stomach clench with fear. The emergency room was bustling with the usual chaos of a Friday night. Nurses moved efficiently between patients while families clustered in uncomfortable plastic chairs, their faces etched with worry and exhaustion. Marcus approached the reception desk, trying to keep his voice steady as he explained his son's symptoms to the tired-looking woman behind the computer screen. "He's been sick for 3 days," Marcus said, shifting Jaden's weight in his arms. "Started with what I thought was just a cold, but tonight his fever spiked to 104 degrees and he can barely breathe. Please, he needs help right now." The receptionist, a middle-aged woman named Sandra, according to her name tag, looked up from her computer screen with practiced sympathy. "I understand your concern, Mr. Thompson. We'll need to get some information first, and then we'll have you seen as soon as possible." As Sandra began typing, asking for insurance information and emergency contacts, Marcus felt his heart sink. He knew what was coming next. The questions about coverage, the discussions about payment plans, the careful dance around the fact that he was uninsured and working multiple minimum wage jobs to make ends meet. He'd been through this before when Jaden had broken his arm the previous year, and the memory of that financial nightmare still kept him awake at night. "Sir, I'm showing that you don't have active insurance coverage," Sandra said gently. "We'll need to discuss payment options before we can admit your son for treatment."
Marcus felt his world crumbling around him.
He'd known this moment might come, had tried to prepare for it, but nothing could have readied him for the reality of holding his desperately ill child while being told that medical care came with a price tag he couldn't afford. "Listen," he said, his voice cracking slightly. "I've got about $800 in my checking account. I can give you that right now, and I can work out payments for the rest. I've got 3 jobs, I'm good for it. But please, my son needs help now." Behind him in line, other families shifted uncomfortably, recognizing the awful familiarity of his situation. The American healthcare system had failed so many of them that his plea sounded like an echo of their own desperate moments. Sandra's expression softened, but her hands remained poised over the keyboard. "Thompson, I wish I could just wave you through, but hospital policy requires either insurance coverage or a substantial deposit for emergency admissions. The best I can do is have you seen in our charity care office on Monday morning." "Monday?" Marcus's voice rose despite his efforts to stay calm. "It's Friday night. My son could die waiting until Monday." That's when he heard a quiet voice behind him say, "Excuse me, but I couldn't help overhearing." Marcus turned to see a man in his late 40s, tall and lean with graying temples and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He was dressed casually in jeans and a sweater, but something about his bearing suggested he was accustomed to being listened to when he spoke. "I'm sorry," the man continued, "but I believe this young man needs immediate medical attention. Sandra, could you please admit the boy right away? I'll take care of any financial arrangements that need to be made." Sandra looked up in surprise, clearly recognizing the man. "Mr. Harrison, are you sure? The costs for emergency pediatric care can be quite substantial." The man, apparently Mr. Freud. Harrison smiled warmly. "I'm quite sure. Please get this child the care he needs immediately." Marcus stared at the stranger in disbelief. "Sir, I can't let you pay for my son's medical bills. I don't even know who you are." My name is Richard Harrison, the man said, extending his hand. And you don't need to know anything else about me right now except that I have a son too, and if he was sick, I'd want someone to help if I couldn't manage it myself. Within minutes, Jaden was being wheeled into an examination room while Marcus struggled to process what had just happened. A complete stranger had just stepped in to save his son's life, asking for nothing in return. As the medical team began their assessment of Jaden, Richard Harrison disappeared as quietly as he had appeared, leaving Marcus with more questions than answers. The next few hours passed in a blur of medical tests, consultations, and gradually improving vital signs. Jaden was diagnosed with severe pneumonia and admitted for IV antibiotics and respiratory support. The doctors assured Marcus that with proper treatment, his son would make a full recovery, but without immediate intervention, the outcome could have been very different. As Marcus sat beside his son's hospital bed, watching Jaden's breathing gradually become easier and his color slowly return to normal, he tried to understand what had happened. The mysterious Mr. Patrick. Harrison had vanished without leaving any contact information, and the hospital staff seemed reluctant to share details about their benefactor. It wasn't until the next morning that Marcus learned the truth about his son's savior. A nurse named Patricia, who had been on duty the night before, approached him with a newspaper in her hand. "Mr. Thompson," she said quietly, "I thought you might want to see this." The newspaper was open to the business section, and there, staring back at Marcus from a large photograph, was the face of the man who had saved his son. The headline read, "Harrison Industries CEO announces record quarterly profits." Richard Harrison wasn't just a kind stranger. He was the CEO of one of the city's largest companies, a man worth hundreds of millions of dollars, who had been visiting a friend in the hospital when he'd encountered Marcus's desperate situation. Marcus stared at the photograph, trying to reconcile the image of the powerful business executive with the quiet, compassionate man who had stepped in to help his family without a moment's hesitation. The article mentioned Harrison's reputation as a demanding but fair leader, his company's impressive growth under his leadership, and his relatively private personal life. But none of that explained why a billionaire CEO would stop to help a struggling single father and his sick child. Most people in Harrison's position would have walked past, perhaps feeling a moment of sympathy, but ultimately uninvolved in the problems of ordinary people. Yet Harrison had not only stepped in, but had done so without any apparent desire for recognition or gratitude. As Jaden began to show signs of improvement, responding well to the antibiotics and breathing more easily, Marcus found himself thinking about the man who had made his son's recovery possible. He had no way to contact Richard Harrison, no way to express his gratitude properly, and no understanding of why someone so wealthy and powerful would care about the problems of someone like him. The hospital staff treated Marcus with a new level of respect and attention once word spread about their mysterious benefactor. Nurses checked on Jaden more frequently, doctors explained every aspect of his treatment in detail, and the administrative staff assured Marcus repeatedly that all costs were covered and that he shouldn't worry about anything except his son's recovery. On Sunday morning, as Marcus was reading to Jaden from one of the books the hospital's child life specialist had brought to the room, there was a soft knock on the door. He looked up to see Richard Harrison standing in the doorway, holding a small gift bag and wearing the same kind expression Marcus remembered from their first encounter. "I hope I'm not intruding," Harrison said. "I wanted to check on how the young man is doing." Jaden looked up from his book with curiosity, not recognizing the man who had saved his life. "Daddy, who's this?" "This? Harrison," Marcus said, struggling to find the right words. "He's the reason you're getting better, son." Harrison stepped into the room and smiled at Jaden. "I brought you something," he said, offering the gift bag. "I heard you like to read." Jaden's eyes lit up as he pulled out a collection of adventure books, each one carefully selected for a child his age. "Thank you, Mr. Harrison. These look really cool." "You're very welcome," Harrison said. "The most important thing is that you're feeling better." As Jaden eagerly examined his new books, Marcus pulled Harrison aside. "Mr. Harrison, I need to thank you properly for what you've done for us. I know who you are now, and I can't understand why you would help people like us." Harrison's expression grew thoughtful. "People like you? You mean a father who loves his son enough to fight for his life? A man who works 3 jobs to provide for his family? Mr. Thompson, you're exactly the kind of person who deserves help when life becomes overwhelming." "But I'm nobody special," Marcus protested. "I stock shelves at night, drive for a delivery service during the day, and clean offices on weekends. I've got no college degree, no special skills, nothing that would make me worth the attention of someone like you." Harrison was quiet for a moment, studying Marcus with those same kind eyes. "May I tell you something about my own childhood, Mr. Thompson?" Marcus nodded, curious despite himself. "I grew up in a neighborhood a lot like the one where you live now," Harrison continued. "My mother worked 3 jobs too, after my father left when I was 8 years old. I remember nights when she came home so exhausted she could barely stand, but she never stopped fighting for my sister and me. I remember what it was like to worry about money, to feel like the world was designed to keep people like us struggling." Marcus felt his assumptions about the wealthy CEO beginning to crumble. "But you made it out. You became successful." "I got lucky," Harrison said simply. "I had teachers who believed in me. Got a scholarship to college and worked my way up from there. But I never forgot where I came from, and I never forgot the people who helped me along the way. When I saw you Friday night, holding your son and trying to figure out how to save his life with $800 in your pocket, I saw my mother. I saw myself." The conversation was interrupted by Jaden calling out to them, "Daddy, look! This book has a dragon in it." Both men smiled, and Marcus felt something shift in his understanding of the situation. This wasn't charity from someone who saw him as pitiable. This was help from someone who understood exactly what he was going through. "Mr. Harrison," Marcus said quietly, "I promise I'll pay you back. It might take time, but I will." Harrison shook his head. "That's not why I did this, Mr. Thompson. But if you really want to do something for me, just be the kind of father to Jaden that you already are. Raise him to be a good man. Teach him to work hard and treat people with kindness. That's payment enough." As Harrison prepared to leave, he turned back to Marcus one more time. "There is one thing, though. When Jaden is well enough to go home, I'd like to offer you a job at Harrison Industries. Nothing fancy, just an entry-level position in our warehouse, but it comes with full health benefits and opportunities for advancement. You strike me as the kind of man who would make the most of a chance like that." Marcus stared at him in disbelief. "You're offering me a job?" "I'm offering you an opportunity," Harrison corrected. "What you do with it is up to you." After Harrison left, Marcus sat beside his son's bed trying to process everything that had happened. In the span of 3 days, his life had gone from desperate crisis to unexpected hope. A stranger had not only saved his son's life but was now offering him a chance at a better future. But even as gratitude overwhelmed him, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Richard Harrison's story than he was sharing. The way the man had spoken about his childhood, the immediate way he had stepped in to help, the job offer that seemed almost too good to be true, it all suggested that this encounter was more significant than a random act of kindness. As Jaden drifted off to sleep that evening, his breathing clear and strong for the first time in days, Marcus found himself wondering about the man who had changed their lives. Who was Richard Harrison really? What had shaped him into someone who would help a stranger without hesitation? And why did Marcus have the strange feeling that this was only the beginning of their story together? 3 weeks later, Marcus Thompson stood outside the imposing glass towers of Harrison Industries, wearing his best shirt and pants and carrying a folder with his employment paperwork. Jaden had made a complete recovery and was back in school, his bout with pneumonia nothing more than a scary memory. The hospital bills, which would have bankrupted Marcus, had been completely covered by Richard Harrison's intervention, and now he was about to start a new chapter in his life. The Harrison Industries building dominated the downtown skyline, its sleek modern design speaking to the company's success and influence. Marcus had driven past it countless times during his years of working multiple jobs around the city, never imagining he would one day walk through its front doors as an employee. The lobby was magnificent, with marble floors, contemporary art on the walls, and a reception desk that looked like it belonged in a luxury hotel. Marcus approached the security guard, a friendly older man who checked his name against a list and directed him to the Human Resources Department on the 15th floor. As the elevator climbed steadily upward, Marcus reflected on how dramatically his life had changed. 3 weeks ago, he had been a desperate father, working himself to exhaustion just to keep his family afloat. Today, he was starting a job that would provide stability, benefits, and the possibility of a real future for himself and Jaden. The Human Resources Director, a woman named Jennifer Walsh, greeted him warmly and walked him through the standard orientation process. The job was in the company's main warehouse, managing inventory and coordinating shipments. It wasn't glamorous work, but it paid significantly more than any of his previous jobs, and the benefits package was better than anything Marcus had ever imagined having access to. "Mr. Thompson," Jennifer said as they finished the paperwork, "I want you to know that Mr. Bowles, be sure, Harrison has personally asked to be kept informed of your progress here. That's highly unusual, and it speaks to his confidence in you. Marcus nodded, still struggling to understand why a billionaire CEO would take such a personal interest in his success. I won't let him down, he said simply. I'm sure you won't, Jennifer replied. Your supervisor will be David Rodriguez, and he's been with the company for 12 years. He knows you're new to this type of work, so don't hesitate to ask questions. The warehouse was a vast, efficiently organized space where Marcus would be responsible for tracking incoming and outgoing inventory using computer systems that were far more sophisticated than anything he had worked with before. David Rodriguez, a patient man in his 40s, spent the first week training Marcus on the various systems and procedures. The learning curve is steep, David explained as he showed Marcus how to operate the inventory management software. But once you get the hang of it, it becomes second nature. The key is attention to detail and staying organized. Marcus threw himself into learning everything he could about his new role. He arrived early, stayed late, and asked countless questions about how to do his job better. His years of working multiple demanding jobs had taught him the value of hard work and reliability, qualities that quickly impressed his new colleagues. During his lunch breaks, Marcus often found himself looking up at the executive floors of the building, wondering about Richard Harrison and what drove such a successful man to help struggling families. He had tried to research more about his benefactor online, but most of the articles focused on business achievements rather than personal details. Harrison appeared to be a very private person who avoided publicity and rarely gave interviews. After his first month on the job, Marcus received his first performance review. David Rodriguez's evaluation was overwhelmingly positive, praising Marcus's work ethic, attention to detail, and willingness to take on additional responsibilities. I've been doing this for 12 years, David told him, and I can honestly say you're one of the most dedicated new employees I've ever trained. You should be proud of what you've accomplished here. The steady paycheck and health benefits transformed Marcus's life in ways he was still discovering. For the first time since Jaden's birth, he wasn't constantly worried about money. He could afford to buy groceries without calculating every penny, could take Jaden to movies without guilt, and could sleep at night without wondering how he would pay the next month's rent. Jaden noticed the change too. His father was less stressed, more present, and able to spend actual quality time with him instead of collapsing exhausted from working 3 different jobs. They established new routines, like reading together every night and having breakfast together every morning before school and work. Daddy, Jaden said one evening as Marcus was helping him with homework, "Are we rich now?" Marcus smiled at his son's innocent question. "No, buddy, we're not rich. But we're doing okay now. We don't have to worry about money the way we used to. Because of Mr. Harrison?" "Because of Mr. Harrison," Marcus confirmed. "And because I have a good job now where I can work hard and take care of us properly." As the weeks passed, Marcus began to hear more about Richard Harrison from his co-workers. The CEO was known for walking through different departments unannounced, talking with employees at all levels, and remembering personal details about their lives and families. Unlike many corporate executives, Harrison seemed genuinely interested in the people who worked for his company. "He's not like other rich guys," explained Maria Santos, a woman who had worked in accounts receivable for 8 years. "My daughter needed surgery 2 years ago, and when he found out about it, he made sure our insurance covered everything, and that I could take as much time off as I needed. He never made a big deal about it, never wanted thanks or recognition. That's just who he is." Similar stories circulated throughout the company. Harrison had helped employees facing foreclosure, supported workers whose family members needed expensive medical treatment, and quietly arranged scholarships for employees' children who wanted to attend college but couldn't afford it. "The man's got more money than he could spend in 10 lifetimes, said Robert Chen, a supervisor in the shipping department. But he remembers what it was like to struggle. His mother cleaned office buildings when he was a kid, and I think that shaped how he treats people now." Marcus found these stories both inspiring and puzzling. He had grown up believing that wealthy people became wealthy by being ruthless and selfish, caring only about profits and success. Richard Harrison seemed to contradict everything Marcus thought he knew about how the world worked. 3 months into his employment at Harrison Industries, Marcus encountered the CEO again. He was working late to complete an important inventory reconciliation when he heard footsteps in the warehouse. Looking up from his computer, he saw Richard Harrison walking through the aisles, apparently conducting one of his informal inspections of the facility. "Mr. Thompson," Harrison said, approaching Marcus's workstation. "I heard you were still here. How are you settling in?" "Very well, sir. Marcus replied, standing up respectfully. I really appreciate the opportunity you've given me. Harrison waved off his thanks. How is Jaden doing, fully recovered from his pneumonia? Marcus was touched that the CEO remembered his son's name and medical condition. He's doing great. Back to his normal energetic self. He asks about you sometimes, wonders why the nice man who brought him books doesn't visit anymore. Maybe I should remedy that, Harrison said with a smile. Would you and Jaden like to have dinner sometime? Nothing fancy, just a chance to catch up properly. The invitation surprised Marcus. He had expected their relationship to remain strictly professional, with perhaps the occasional polite greeting if they happened to encounter each other in the building. Are you sure? I wouldn't want to impose on your time. You wouldn't be imposing, Harrison assured him. I don't have much family of my own, and I enjoyed meeting Jaden. Sometimes it's nice to have dinner with people who aren't trying to sell me something or ask for a favor. They arranged to meet the following Saturday at a family restaurant that Harrison suggested, a casual place known for its good food and relaxed atmosphere. Marcus spent the week wondering what they would talk about, and why a billionaire would want to spend his free time with a warehouse worker and his 7-year-old son. Saturday evening arrived, and Marcus and Jaden met Harrison at the restaurant. Jaden was excited about seeing the man who had brought him books in the hospital, and he chatted enthusiastically about school, his friends, and the dragon book he was currently reading. Mr. Harrison, Jaden said as they waited for their food, my daddy says you helped us when I was sick. Thank you for helping us. Harrison's expression grew soft. You're very welcome, Jaden. I'm just glad you're feeling better now. Are you really one of the richest men in the city? Jaden asked with the directness that only children possess. Marcus felt his face flush with embarrassment. Jaden, that's not a polite question to ask. But Harrison laughed. It's okay. Yes, Jaden, I suppose I am pretty wealthy. Does that seem strange to you? Jaden considered this seriously. Kind of. Rich people in movies are usually mean, but you're nice. Why are you nice if you're rich? Well, Harrison said thoughtfully, I think being rich means you have a responsibility to help other people when you can. Money is just a tool. What matters is how you use it. As the evening progressed, Marcus found himself relaxing in Harrison's company. The CEO was surprisingly easy to talk to, asking genuine questions about Marcus's work, his goals for the future, and his experiences raising Jaden as a single father. In return, Harrison shared more about his own background and the values that had shaped his approach to business and life. My mother always told me that success meant nothing if you forgot where you came from, Harrison explained. She said the measure of a person wasn't how much money they made, but how they treated people who couldn't do anything for them in return. Your mother sounds like a wise woman, Marcus observed. She was, Harrison said, a note of sadness entering his voice. She died 5 years ago, but I tried to live by the principles she taught me. After dinner, as they prepared to part ways, Harrison turned to Marcus with a thoughtful expression.
Marcus, can I ask you something?
What are your long-term goals? What would you like to do with your life if you could do anything? Marcus was quiet for a moment, considering the question. No one had asked him about his dreams in years. Survival had consumed so much of his energy that he had stopped thinking about possibilities beyond making it through each day. I guess I'd like to be able to provide a really good life for Jaden, he said finally. I'd like him to have opportunities I never had. Maybe go to college if he wants to. And I'd like to feel like I was contributing something meaningful, not just getting by. Harrison nodded approvingly. Those are good goals. Have you ever thought about going back to school yourself? Harrison Industries has an educational assistance program that might interest you. Marcus shook his head. I barely graduated high school. College was never something people like me considered. People like you, Harrison repeated, echoing their earlier conversation in the hospital. Marcus, intelligence has nothing to do with family background or economic circumstances. You've proven yourself to be reliable, hardworking, and capable of learning new systems quickly. Those are exactly the qualities that predict success in higher education. The idea of attending college seemed impossible to Marcus, but Harrison's confidence was persuasive. I wouldn't even know where to start, he admitted. That's what the Educational Assistance Program is for, Harrison explained. It provides counseling, financial support, and flexible scheduling for employees who want to further their education. Would you be interested in learning more about it? As Marcus drove home that night with Jaden sleeping in the passenger seat, he found himself thinking about possibilities he had never dared to consider. Richard Harrison had not only saved his son's life and given him a stable job, but was now suggesting that even greater opportunities might be within reach. The mysterious CEO continued to challenge every assumption Marcus had about success, wealth, and the kind of person who achieved both. But more importantly, he was beginning to challenge Marcus's assumptions about what might be possible for his own future. What Marcus didn't know was that their dinner conversation had reminded Richard Harrison of his own younger self, and had planted the seeds of an idea that would soon change both of their lives in ways neither of them could have imagined. 6 months had passed since Marcus began working at Harrison Industries, and his life had settled into a rhythm he never could have imagined. He had enrolled in evening business classes through the company's educational assistance program, was excelling in his warehouse position, and for the first time in years, he felt hopeful about the future. It was on a rainy Thursday morning that everything changed again. Marcus was organizing inventory reports when David Rodriguez approached his workstation with an unusual expression on his face. "Marcus, Mr. Harrison, wants to see you in his office. Right away." The word sent a chill through Marcus's chest. In his experience, being called to the boss's office was rarely good news. "Did he say what it's about?" David shook his head. "Just that it was important and couldn't wait." The elevator ride to the executive floor felt endless. Marcus had never been to Richard Harrison's office before, and he spent the entire trip wondering what could be so urgent that it required immediate attention. Had he made a mistake in his work? Was there a problem with his performance that somehow hadn't shown up in his positive reviews? Harrison's assistant, a professional woman named Catherine, greeted him warmly and immediately ushered him into the CEO's spacious corner office. The room was elegant but not ostentatious, with large windows overlooking the city, comfortable leather furniture, and walls lined with books rather than the typical corporate awards and photographs. Richard Harrison stood up from behind his desk as Marcus entered, but his usual warm smile was absent. Instead, he wore an expression that Marcus couldn't quite read, serious, perhaps even troubled. "Marcus, thank you for coming up so quickly. Please, have a seat." Harrison gestured to one of the chairs facing his desk. "I need to share something with you, and I'm afraid it's going to be difficult to hear." Marcus felt his stomach drop. "Is something wrong? Did I do something?" No, nothing like that," Harrison assured him quickly. "Your work has been exemplary. This is about something else entirely, something personal, that I probably should have told you months ago." Harrison moved to the window, looking out at the city below as he gathered his thoughts. When he turned back to Marcus, his expression was pained. "Marcus, I need to tell you about why I was at the hospital that night when I met you and Jaden." "You said you were visiting a friend," Marcus recalled. "That wasn't entirely true," Harrison said quietly. "I was there for a very different reason, and it's something that connects us in a way I never expected when I first helped your son." Marcus waited, confusion growing with each passing second. Harrison returned to his desk and opened a drawer, withdrawing a manila folder thick with papers. 3 months ago, I hired a private investigator to help me find someone I've been looking for since I was 18 years old. He handed the folder to Marcus, who opened it with trembling hands. Inside were photographs, documents, and what appeared to be an investigative report. The first photograph made Marcus's breath catch in his throat. It was a picture of himself and Jaden taken outside their apartment building. "I don't understand," Marcus said, looking up at Harrison with growing alarm. "Why would you have me investigated? Why would you be looking for me?" Harrison's voice was barely above a whisper when he replied, "Because, Marcus, I believe you're my brother." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. He stared at Harrison, certain he had misheard. "That's impossible. My father died when I was 2 years old. I don't have any siblings." "Your father didn't die," Harrison said gently. "He left, and when he left your mother, he was already living with my mother and me in another part of the city. Your mother was his second family, Marcus, a family he abandoned when you were still a toddler." Marcus felt the room spinning around him. "No, that can't be right." "My mother would have told me." Harrison opened another folder and handed Marcus a birth certificate, his own birth certificate, but one that Marcus had never seen before. Under father's name, it listed Thomas Harrison. Marcus's own birth certificate, the one his mother had always shown him, listed the father as unknown. "I think your mother was trying to protect you from the truth about our father," Harrison continued.
Thomas Harrison was not a good man, Marcus.
"He abandoned both of our families, left my mother struggling to raise me alone, just like he left your mother struggling to raise you." The investigative report contained details that made Marcus's head reel. Photographs of their father, documentation of his relationships with both women, and most shocking of all, evidence that Thomas Harrison had been aware of both sons but had chosen to acknowledge neither. "How long have you known about me?" Marcus asked, his voice hollow. "I found out about your existence when I was 18, Harrison replied. "My mother finally told me the truth about our father after years of me asking questions. She said he had mentioned having another son, but she didn't know your name or where you lived. I've been looking for you ever since." Marcus stared at the document spread before him, trying to process the magnitude of what he was learning. "So when you helped Jaden at the hospital, I had no idea who you were," Harrison said quickly. "The investigator had been tracking down leads for months, but your name hadn't come up yet. It wasn't until 2 weeks after I helped Jaden that the investigator brought me a report that included your employment history. When I saw your name and your son's age, I started to suspect. That's why I offered you the job. I wanted a chance to get to know you before I told you the truth." The revelation explained so much. Harrison's immediate willingness to help a stranger, his personal interest in Marcus's success, his invitation to dinner with Jaden. But it also raised disturbing questions about deception and manipulation. So everything that's happened, the job, the educational assistance, the kindness, it was all because you suspected I was your brother? Harrison shook his head emphatically.
No, Marcus.
Everything that happened was because I saw a good man trying to take care of his son and I wanted to help. The fact that you might be my brother didn't change my desire to help you, but it did explain the immediate connection I felt to you and Jaden. Marcus stood up abruptly, pacing to the window as he tried to make sense of his emotions. Anger, confusion, gratitude, and betrayal all warred within him. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Why let me think you were just some generous stranger? Because I was afraid, Harrison admitted. Afraid you wouldn't believe me. Afraid you'd think I was some wealthy man trying to buy a relationship with a long-lost brother. Afraid that knowing the truth would change how you saw me, and whether you'd want any kind of relationship at all. The office fell silent except for the sound of rain against the windows. Marcus studied the city below, trying to understand how his life had taken such an impossible turn. 6 months ago, he had been a struggling single father with no family except his son. Now he was discovering that one of the most powerful men in the city was his half-brother. "What do you want from me?" Marcus asked finally, turning back to face Harrison. "I want to be your brother," Harrison said simply. "I want Jaden to know his uncle. I want us to be a family, if you're willing to try. I know it's complicated, and I know I should have told you sooner, but I hope you can understand why I handled it the way I did." Marcus looked down at the investigative report again, studying the photographs of the father he had never known. Thomas Harrison appeared to be a handsome man with dark hair and kind eyes, eyes that Marcus now realized he shared with Richard. "He really abandoned both of us?" Marcus asked. "He left my mother when I was 8 years old," Richard confirmed. "Told her he was going to find work in another city and would send for us. We never heard from him again. I found out later that he had been living with other women in other cities, creating families and then abandoning them when life became too difficult or complicated." "What kind of man does that?" Marcus asked, more to himself than to Richard. "A weak man," Richard replied. "A selfish man who couldn't handle the responsibility of being a father. But Marcus, we don't have to be defined by his failures. We have a chance to be the family he never allowed us to be." Marcus was quiet for a long time, processing everything he had learned. The anger he had felt initially was beginning to fade, replaced by a strange sense of relief. For his entire life he had wondered about his father, had created fantasies about the man who had helped create him. Learning that Thomas Harrison was simply a flawed, irresponsible person was somehow less painful than the mystery had been. "Does this change anything about my job?" Marcus asked practically. "Only if you want it to," Richard assured him. "You earned your position through your own merit, and you've proven yourself to be an excellent employee. That has nothing to do with our family relationship. And if I decide I don't want a relationship with you, if this is all too complicated for me to handle?" Richard's expression grew sad, but he nodded. "Then I'll respect that decision. I'll always be grateful that I was able to help Jaden when he was sick, and I'll always be proud of what you've accomplished. But I won't force a relationship that you don't want." Marcus thought about Jaden, about how much his son had enjoyed meeting Richard at dinner, how excited the boy became whenever he talked about Mr. Rook. Harrison, who brought me books. He thought about his own loneliness, about how he had always wondered what it would be like to have family beyond just himself and his son. "I need time to think about this," Marcus said finally. "This is a lot to process." "Of course," Richard agreed. "Take all the time you need. And Marcus, regardless of what you decide about our relationship, I want you to know that meeting you and Jaden has been one of the most meaningful things to happen in my life in years." As Marcus prepared to leave the office, he turned back one more time. "Richard, can I ask you something?" Do you really think our father would have stayed if he had known how successful you became? Richard considered the question carefully. I used to wonder about that when I was younger, but I've come to believe that a man who could abandon his children once would do it again if staying became inconvenient. Success doesn't change character, Marcus. Our father left because that's who he was, not because of anything we did or didn't do. Marcus nodded, understanding more than he wanted to about abandonment and its aftermath. I should get back to work. People will wonder where I've been. Take the rest of the day off if you need it, Richard offered. Catherine can call down to David and explain that you're handling a personal matter. No, I think working will help me process this, but thank you. As Marcus rode the elevator back down to the warehouse, he realized that his life had just taken another dramatic turn. 6 months ago, Richard Harrison had been a mysterious stranger who saved his son's life. Today, he had become something even more unexpected. Family. The question now was whether Marcus was ready to embrace that possibility, or whether the complications of such a relationship would prove too difficult to navigate. Either way, he knew that the comfortable routine he had built over the past 6 months was about to change once again. And somewhere in the back of his mind, a voice wondered what other surprises Richard Harrison might have in store for him. 4. Marcus spent the next 2 weeks in a state of emotional turmoil that affected every aspect of his life. He found himself distracted at work, absent-minded with Jaden, and unable to sleep properly as he wrestled with the revelation that Richard Harrison was his half-brother. The comfortable stability he had finally achieved felt suddenly precarious, built on a foundation he hadn't fully understood. Jaden noticed his father's preoccupation immediately. The 7-year-old had always been perceptive about his father's moods, a skill developed during the years when Marcus's stress levels had been a constant concern. "Daddy, are you worried about something?" Jaden asked one evening as they sat at their small kitchen table, pushing food around their plates without much appetite. Marcus looked up at his son, realizing he had been staring into space again. "Just thinking about some grown-up stuff, buddy. Nothing for you to worry about." "Is it about Mr. Harrison? You've been acting weird ever since you had that meeting with him." The child's intuition surprised Marcus. He had tried to shield Jaden from his confusion, but apparently hadn't been successful. "Why would you think it's about Mr. Harrison?" "Because you get the same look on your face when you talk about him that you used to get when you were worried about money," Jaden observed with startling clarity. "Like you're trying to figure something out that's really important." Marcus set down his fork and studied his son's earnest face. "Jaden, how would you feel if I told you that Mr. Harrison might be part of our family? Like, he might be my grandpa?" Jaden asked hopefully. Marcus had told his son that his grandfather had died before he was born, which was essentially true if not entirely complete.
Not exactly.
"More like he might be my brother, which would make him your uncle." Jaden's eyes widened with excitement. "Really? We could have an uncle? That would be so cool. He could come to my birthday party and teach me about business stuff and maybe take us to fancy restaurants again." The boy's immediate enthusiasm contrasted sharply with Marcus's own complicated feelings. For Jaden, the possibility of having extended family was purely positive, a source of excitement rather than anxiety. But then, Jaden hadn't spent his entire life believing he was alone in the world, hadn't built his identity around being self-sufficient and independent. "What if it meant big changes for us?" Marcus asked carefully. "What if having an uncle like Mr. Harrison made our lives very different?" Jaden considered this seriously.
Different how?
"Well, he's very wealthy and important. If he's family, he might want to be involved in decisions about your education, where we live, how we spend our time. Some people might treat us differently because we're related to him." "But, Daddy," Jaden said with the straightforward logic that children often possessed, "you always taught me that family takes care of each other. If Mr. Harrison is family, then he's supposed to care about us, and we're supposed to care about him." "That's good, right?" Marcus found himself smiling at his son's simple wisdom. "Yes, buddy, that's exactly right." That evening, after Jaden had gone to bed, Marcus called his mother's oldest friend, Clara Williams, who had been like a grandmother to him growing up. If anyone might have insights about his family history, it would be Clara. "Marcus, honey, what's got you calling so late?" Clara asked when she answered the phone. "Clara, I need to ask you about my father, about what really happened when I was little." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "What brought this on, baby? You haven't asked about him in years." "I may have found my half-brother," Marcus said simply. "And I need to understand the truth about what happened." Another pause, longer this time. "Your mama made me promise never to tell you unless you specifically asked. She was trying to protect you from getting hurt. I'm asking now." Clara sighed deeply. Your daddy, Thomas Harrison. He was a charming man when he wanted to be. Had your mama completely swept off her feet. But he had a wandering eye and a weak character. When you were about 2 years old, your mama found out he was living with another woman across town, had been for years, had a son with her too, though that boy was older than you. The confirmation of Richard's story sent a wave of mixed emotions through Marcus. Why didn't she tell me I had a brother? She tried to find out more about the other family after your daddy left, but the woman had moved away. Your mama figured it was better to let sleeping dogs lie than to track down people who might not want to be found. She always said, if God meant for you to know your brother, he'd make it happen in his own time. Marcus thought about that fateful night in the hospital emergency room, about the seemingly random encounter that had changed everything. Perhaps Clara and his mother had been right about divine timing. Clara, do you think I should pursue a relationship with him, this brother?
That depends, honey.
What kind of man is he? Marcus found himself smiling. He's the kind of man who pays for a stranger's child's medical bills without being asked. The kind who gives someone a job and educational opportunities. The kind who remembers a 7-year-old's name and brings him books in the hospital. Sounds like the apple fell far from the tree in his case, Clara observed. Sometimes the best thing that can happen to children of bad fathers is that they decide to be nothing like the man who raised them. After ending the call with Clara, Marcus felt some of his confusion beginning to clear. The truth about his father was actually less devastating than some of the possibilities he had imagined over the years. And Richard Harrison, whatever complications his wealth and status might bring, had proven himself to be a good man through his actions. The next morning, Marcus made a decision. During his lunch break, he took the elevator to the executive floor and asked Catherine if Mr. Harrison had a few minutes to speak with him. Of course, she replied warmly. Go right in. Richard looked up from his computer as Marcus entered, his expression hopeful but cautious. Marcus, how are you doing? I hope you've had time to process everything. I have, Marcus replied, taking a seat across from Richard's desk. And I've made some decisions. Richard leaned back in his chair, clearly preparing himself for whatever Marcus might say. First, I want to apologize for how I reacted when you told me the truth. I was overwhelmed and probably said some things that weren't entirely fair. You had every right to be upset, Richard assured him. I should have been honest from the beginning. Maybe, Marcus acknowledged, but I think I understand now why you handled it the way you did. And I've decided that I'd like to try having a relationship with you, as brothers. The relief that washed over Richard's face was unmistakable. Are you sure? I don't want you to feel pressured. I'm sure. But I have some conditions. Richard nodded. Of course. What do you need? First, I want to keep working here and earning my position based on my own merit. I don't want special treatment because we're related. Absolutely. Your work speaks for itself. Second, I need you to understand that I'm not interested in your money. I don't want handouts or charity. If you want to help with something specific, like Jaden's education, we can discuss it, but I need to maintain my independence. I respect that completely. Third, any major decisions involving Jaden need to be discussed with me first. You can be his uncle, and I want you to be, but I'm still his father, and I make the decisions about his life. Richard smiled. I wouldn't want it any other way. Marcus felt a weight lifting from his shoulders. Good. Then I guess we're family. Richard stood up and extended his hand, then seemed to think better of it and came around the desk to embrace Marcus instead. For a moment, both men were quiet, processing the significance of this new beginning. There's something else I want to discuss, Richard said as they separated. Something I've been thinking about since our conversation 2 weeks ago. What's that? I'm 51 years old, Marcus. I've built a successful company, but I don't have children of my own. I've been thinking about legacy, about what happens to Harrison Industries when I'm no longer able to run it. Marcus felt a familiar wariness creeping in. Richard, if you're thinking about leaving me something in your will, I'm thinking about something much more immediate than that, Richard interrupted. I'm thinking about bringing you into the business as more than a warehouse worker. I'd like to start training you for a management position, with the eventual goal of you joining the executive team. The offer was so unexpected that Marcus couldn't immediately respond. I don't have any business experience beyond what I've learned in the past few months. You have something more valuable than experience, Richard replied. You have character, work ethic, and the ability to connect with people at every level. Those are qualities that can't be taught. The business knowledge can be learned. This isn't just because we're brothers. This is because you're exactly the kind of person I would want to help lead this company into the future. The fact that you're my brother makes it more meaningful, but it's not the reason for the offer. Marcus thought about his evening business classes, about the goals he had begun to develop for himself and Jaden. The opportunity Richard was describing went far beyond anything he had dared to imagine. What would this mean practically? It would mean accelerated education, mentorship from our senior management team, and gradually increasing responsibilities. It would take several years, but if you're willing to commit to the work, I believe you could eventually be ready for an executive role. And Jaden? Jaden would grow up knowing that his father is a successful business leader, that education and hard work can take you anywhere you want to go. He'd have every opportunity we could provide, but more importantly, he'd have a father who proved that it's possible to rise above your circumstances. Marcus was quiet for several minutes, considering the magnitude of what was being offered. 6 months ago, his biggest dream had been finding stable employment with health benefits. Now he was being offered the possibility of a career that could transform not only his life, but Jaden's future as well. "I'll need to think about this too," he said finally. "Of course. But Marcus, I want you to know that whatever you decide, you'll always have a place in this company and in my life. We're family now, and that's not dependent on your career choices." As Marcus prepared to leave, he realized that his life was about to change yet again. But this time, the change felt like possibility rather than crisis, like opportunity rather than disruption. "Richard," he said, turning back at the door, "thank you for everything, for helping Jaden, for giving me a job, for finding me. I know our father let both of us down, but I think we turned out okay in spite of him." "Better than okay?" Richard replied. "I think we turned out to be the kind of men who would be proud to call each other brother." As Marcus returned to the warehouse, he found himself thinking about the future with an excitement he hadn't felt in years. He had a brother, Jaden had an uncle, and together they were building something that their father had never been able to provide, a real family. 2 years had passed since Marcus learned the truth about his relationship with Richard Harrison. In that time, their brotherhood had deepened into something genuine and meaningful. Marcus had accepted the management training opportunity and was now working as an operations supervisor, having proven himself capable of far more than anyone, including himself, had originally believed possible. Jaden, now 9 years old, had blossomed under the influence of his newly discovered uncle. Richard attended school events, helped with homework, and had become the father figure that Jaden had never had. The boy's confidence and academic performance had improved dramatically, and he often spoke about wanting to run a business someday, just like Uncle Richard. It was on a cold February morning that their world shifted once again, in ways that none of them could have anticipated. Marcus was in his office reviewing quarterly inventory reports when his assistant knocked on the door. "Mr. Thompson, there's a woman here to see you. She says it's urgent and personal. Her name is Helen Morrison." The name meant nothing to Marcus, but something in his assistant's tone suggested this wasn't a typical business meeting. "Send her in, please." The woman who entered his office was probably in her late 60s, with silver hair and kind eyes that seemed somehow familiar. She carried herself with dignity despite obvious nervousness, and she clutched a large envelope in her hands. "Mr. Thompson, thank you for seeing me without an appointment. I'm Helen Morrison, and I have information about your family that I believe you need to know." Marcus gestured for her to sit down, intrigued but cautious. Over the past 2 years, several people had approached him claiming to have information about his father or other relatives, usually hoping to gain something from his connection to Richard Harrison. "What kind of information, Mrs. Morrison?" Helen opened the envelope and withdrew a collection of photographs and documents. "Mr. Thompson, I knew your father. Thomas Harrison was my brother." Marcus felt his pulse quicken. "Your brother?" "Yes. And what I need to tell you is that everything you think you know about your family is wrong." She handed him a photograph that made his breath catch. It showed a much younger version of herself standing next to a man Marcus recognized as his father, but between them was a woman he had never seen before, holding a baby. "This is your father, Thomas, with his wife Sarah and their daughter Emma in 1985, Helen explained. Sarah was his legal wife, Mr. B. Thompson, his only wife. The women he lived with in this city, including your mother and Richard Harrison's mother, were never married to him. There were relationships he maintained while he was already married with a family." Marcus stared at the photograph, trying to process what he was hearing. "But Richard said his mother was with our father for years. She thought they were going to be married." "Thomas was very good at making women believe whatever served his purposes," Helen said sadly. "He would disappear for months at a time, telling Sarah he was traveling for work. During those absences, he was living with other women. creating the illusion of committed relationships while maintaining his real family elsewhere. She handed him another document, a death certificate dated 3 months earlier. Thomas died in December, Mr. Rowe. Thompson. Sarah asked me to track down any other children he might have had because she felt they deserved to know the truth about their father. Marcus studied the death certificate, feeling a strange mixture of sadness and relief. The man who had abandoned him was truly gone now, and somehow that felt like closure he hadn't known he needed. Mrs. Morrison, this is all very interesting, but I'm not sure why you felt it was urgent to share this information. Richard and I have built a good relationship based on what we thought we knew about our father. Helen's expression grew more serious. Because there's something else, something that changes everything about your relationship with Mr. Harrison. She handed him a manila folder marked confidential and gestured for him to open it. Inside were medical records, DNA test results, and a letter written in spidery handwriting. What am I looking at? Marcus asked, though something deep in his stomach was already telling him he didn't want to know. Those are the results of a DNA test performed on hair samples from both you and Richard Harrison, Helen said quietly. Samples that were collected and tested without either of your knowledge. Marcus felt the room spinning as he read the results. According to the scientific analysis, he and Richard Harrison shared no genetic relationship whatsoever. They were not half-brothers. They were not related in any way. This is impossible, Marcus said, his voice barely above a whisper. We were both involved with the same man. You were both involved with Thomas, yes. But Thomas Harrison was not your father, Mr. Thompson. Helen opened another folder and withdrew a birth certificate, Marcus's real birth certificate, not the altered version his mother had always shown him. Your father was a man named James Thompson, a co-worker of your mother's who died in a construction accident when you were 18 months old. Your mother was devastated by his loss and vulnerable when she met Thomas a few months later. She was so desperate for stability for you that she allowed Thomas to convince her he would adopt you and give you his name. Marcus stared at the birth certificate, seeing his real father's name for the first time. James Thompson, a man who had actually wanted to be his father, who had died before he could see his son grow up. Thomas never legally adopted you, Helen continued. He simply convinced your mother to change your name and create a false story about your parentage. When he left, your mother was too ashamed to tell you the truth. She had allowed herself to be deceived so completely that she couldn't bear to admit what had happened. The implications were crashing over Marcus in waves. If he wasn't Richard's brother, then everything about their relationship was based on a lie. The job, the mentorship, the family bond they had built. All of it had been founded on a misunderstanding. How did you get DNA samples from us? Marcus asked, his voice hollow. Richard Harrison hired me to investigate his family history more thoroughly about 6 months ago, Helen admitted. He wanted to understand more about Thomas and trace any other relatives he might have. During that investigation, we discovered the truth about your parentage. Mr. Harrison asked me to have the DNA analysis done to confirm what we had found. Marcus felt betrayed all over again. Richard knows? He's known for 6 months that we're not related? Helen nodded sadly. He's been struggling with how to tell you. He was afraid that learning the truth would destroy the relationship you've built and hurt Jaden, who has grown so attached to his uncle. He asked me to approach you because he didn't know how to have this conversation himself. Marcus stood up abruptly, pacing to the window as he had done in Richard's office 2 years earlier. But this time, the view outside seemed to mock him. Everything he thought he had gained, the family connection, the sense of belonging, the feeling that he wasn't alone in the world, had been built on false information. Does this mean he wants me to leave the company? Marcus asked. Now that he knows I'm not actually family, I think you should ask him that yourself, Helen replied gently. But from what I observed during our conversations about this situation, I believe Mr. Prudentier Harrison cares about you and Jaden for who you are, not because he thought you were related. Harrison sat the man in his office for over an hour, staring at the DNA results and trying to understand how his life had taken such an impossible turn once again. Just when he had begun to feel secure in his identity and relationships, everything had been revealed to be something different than what he had believed. The phone rang, startling him out of his reverie. It was Catherine from Richard's office. Mr. Brian Thompson, Mr. Harrison would like to see you when you have a moment. He said to tell you that Mrs. Morrison had visited and that he thought you might want to talk. The elevator ride to the executive floor felt different this time. Instead of the nervousness he had felt during previous summons to Richard's office, Marcus felt a strange calm. Whatever was about to happen, at least he would finally know where he stood. Richard was waiting by his office window when Marcus entered, and he turned with an expression of profound sadness and apprehension. Marcus, I know Mrs. Morrison spoke with you. I want you to know how sorry I am that you had to learn the truth this way. How long have you known? Marcus asked directly. 6 months. The DNA results came back in August. Why didn't you tell me immediately? Richard moved to his desk and sat down heavily. Because I was selfish. Because I didn't want to lose the brother I thought I had found. Because I couldn't bear the thought of Jaden losing his uncle. Because I had grown to care about you both so much that the idea of our relationship changing was unbearable to me. Marcus took a seat across from Richard, studying the man who had been the most important person in his life for the past 2 years. What happens now? Do you want us to leave? Leave? Richard looked genuinely shocked. Marcus, nothing about how I feel about you and Jaden has changed. You're not my biological brother, but you've been more of a family to me than anyone else in my adult life. If anything, learning that our connection wasn't based on shared genetics makes it more meaningful, not less. That everything between us started because you thought I was your brother. No, Richard said firmly. Everything between us started because I saw a father desperately trying to save his son's life, and I wanted to help. Yes, I later thought we might be related, and that influenced some of my decisions. But Marcus, do you really think the way I feel about you and Jaden is only because of shared DNA? Marcus considered this, thinking about the past 2 years of Sunday dinners, birthday parties, school events, and quiet conversations. The relationship they had built was real, regardless of how it had started. I don't know what to think anymore, Marcus admitted. I feel like everything in my life has been based on lies or misunderstandings. Then, let me tell you what I know to be absolutely true, Richard said, leaning forward intently. I know that you're one of the most honorable men I've ever met. I know that you've worked harder than anyone to provide for your son and better yourself. I know that Jaden is an incredible kid who lights up every room he enters. I know that having you both in my life has made me happier than I've been in years. Richard stood up and came around his desk. Marcus, I don't need you to be my biological brother. I need you to be my family by choice. That's actually more valuable than shared genetics, because it means we chose each other. What about Jaden? He thinks you're his uncle. I'd like to remain his uncle, if you'll let me. Not because of genetics, but because I love that boy and want to be part of his life. Family isn't just about blood, Marcus. It's about the people who show up for you, who care about your well-being, who celebrate your successes and support you through difficulties. Marcus felt tears building in his eyes as he realized Richard was right. The past 2 years hadn't been a lie. They had been real experiences with real emotions and real connections. The DNA results didn't change any of that. So what are you saying? That you want us to keep pretending we're related? I'm saying I want us to stop pretending we're only related because we thought we shared a father, Richard replied. I want us to acknowledge that we're family because we choose to be, because we care about each other, because we've built something meaningful together. Marcus thought about Jaden, about how devastated the boy would be to lose the uncle he adored. He thought about his own loneliness before Richard had come into their lives, about the stability and hope that their relationship had provided. He thought about Richard himself, a successful but lonely man who had found purpose and joy in being part of their small family. Richard, Marcus said finally, I may not be your biological brother, but you're the best brother I could have asked for.
The relief on Richard's face was immediate and profound.
Does this mean you'll stay, both of you? We'll stay, Marcus confirmed. But I want Jaden to know the truth when he's old enough to understand it. I want him to know that the people who love him chose to be in his life, not because they had to be, but because they wanted to be. That sounds perfect to me, Richard agreed. As the two men embraced, Marcus realized that Helen Morrison had been wrong about one thing. Learning the truth hadn't destroyed their relationship. It had made it stronger. They were no longer brothers by accident at birth, but by deliberate choice. And that, Marcus thought, was actually much better. That evening, as Marcus and Richard explained to Jaden that they weren't actually related by blood but had chosen to be family anyway, the 9-year-old listened with his characteristic seriousness before delivering his verdict. So Uncle Richard picked us to be his family, and we picked him too. That's right, buddy. Jaden grinned. That's even cooler than being related. It means he really, really wanted us. Sometimes, Marcus reflected, children understood the most important truths better than adults ever could. Richard Harrison had done the unthinkable. He had loved them not because he had to, but because he chose to. And in a world where too many people were abandoned by those who were supposed to care about them, being chosen was the greatest gift of all.